Your daughter-in-law is on my plane. So who is in our house? That was the first thing my son said when he called me that morning. He's a pilot, and his voice was shaking, something I'd never heard before. I told him his sister-in-law, Vanessa, was upstairs taking a shower. I had just spoken to her a few minutes ago. Then he went silent. When he spoke again, his words cut right through me. Mom, I'm not mistaken. She's here, sitting in first class. I'm holding her passport in my hand. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I turned toward the stairs, and right then, I heard footsteps behind me. That's when my life changed forever. From that day on, nothing inside our house felt right anymore. Not her smile, not her voice, not even the way she looked at me. Stay with me, because what I found out later will make you question how well you really know the people living under your roof. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. My name is Maggie Collins. I'm 64, a widow, and I live in a quiet neighborhood in Portland with my oldest son, Ryan, his wife, Vanessa, and my grandson, Owen. My younger son, Caleb, is a pilot. He's always flying somewhere, but he calls me every chance he gets. My mornings are simple. I wake up early, make breakfast, and help Vanessa get Owen ready for school. Ryan usually leaves before 8. That morning was no different. Ryan came downstairs already dressed for work. He kissed my cheek and said, "Don't wait for me for dinner, Mom. I'll be home late." I told him to drive safe and not skip lunch like he always does. He laughed and waved as he left. A few minutes later, Vanessa came down in her robe, smiling the way she always does in the morning. "Mom, I'm going to take a quick shower, okay?" she said. I nodded. She was a good woman, organized, polite, always making sure everyone was fed and the house stayed in order. I used to tell my friends how lucky I was to have her as my daughter-in-law. Owen was already running around the kitchen, making little airplane noises. "Grandma, the bus is coming," he shouted. He hugged me tight, smelling like soap and crayons, then rushed out the door. I waved to him from the porch as the school bus stopped at the corner. When the house finally went quiet, I stood at the sink washing the breakfast dishes. I remember thinking how peaceful everything felt. After my husband passed away, I had always worried about feeling lonely, but living with my family filled that emptiness. Watching Ryan work hard, seeing Vanessa take care of Owen, it made me proud. Then the phone rang. It was the landline. We don't use it much anymore, but it still sits on the counter. I wiped my hands and answered. "Hi, Mom," Caleb said. His voice always warms my heart. "I've got a few minutes before my next flight, just wanted to check in." I smiled instantly. "Where are you now?" "Portland Airport. We're flying to Paris today. You know how long those flights are?" We talked for a bit. He asked about Owen, about the house. I told him everything was fine. Then he paused for a long moment and I could tell something was off. "Mom," he said quietly, "can I ask you something strange?" "Of course," I said, still smiling. "Is Vanessa at home?" I looked toward the stairs and could hear the shower running. "Yes," I said. "She's upstairs getting ready." "Why?" He didn't answer right away. I heard background noise, voices, an announcement at the airport, the faint sound of him breathing. Then he said, "Mom, that's impossible." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "I'm holding her passport in my hand," he said. "She just boarded my plane. She's sitting in first class." For a moment, I thought he was joking. "Oh, come on, Caleb," I said. "You must have seen someone who looks like her." But he didn't laugh. His voice was calm, but serious. "Mom, I'm telling you the truth. I saw her. I even spoke to her." She smiled at me and said, "Good luck, Captain." "It's her." I stood frozen, still holding the phone. The sound of the water upstairs suddenly felt louder. I looked toward the stairs. "Caleb, she's right here in the house. I heard her just a minute ago." He didn't respond for several seconds. Then he said quietly, "Mom, I'm looking at her right now. There's no mistake." My heart started pounding so fast it hurt. I didn't even realize the water in the sink had overflowed until I felt it soaking through my slippers. I grabbed a towel and turned off the tap with shaking hands. "Caleb," I said softly, "I think you're tired. Maybe you saw someone who just looks like her." He sighed. "Mom, please listen to me. I know my sister-in-law. It's her." And then, as I was about to answer, the shower upstairs stopped. I heard the bathroom door open, followed by footsteps coming down the stairs. "Mom? Who's on the phone?" Vanessa's voice sounded cheerful, the same as always. I froze. "Oh, just a friend," I said, trying to sound normal. "Okay," she replied. "I'll make some tea once I'm done getting ready." I waited until I heard her walk into the kitchen before I whispered into the phone. "Caleb, she's here. I can hear her." On the other end, my son's voice came out firm and low. "Mom, I don't know what's going on, but whoever's in your house, it's not her." That's when my hands started shaking uncontrollably. I couldn't hold the phone anymore. It slipped from my fingers and hit the floor. Vanessa appeared in the doorway a moment later, towel wrapped around her hair, smiling as if nothing had happened. "Everything okay, Mom?" I forced a smile. Yes, just fine." She nodded and went back to her room. I stood there, staring at the phone on the floor, still hearing Caleb's words echoing in my head. "She's on my plane, Mom." The clock ticked, but time didn't feel real anymore. My chest felt tight. I didn't understand what was happening. Maybe there was a mistake, some mix-up. Maybe Caleb saw someone else. But deep down, I knew my son. He wouldn't say something like that unless he was sure. I picked up the phone again, but the call had already ended. I stood there for a while, trying to breathe normally. The kitchen looked the same as always, but suddenly everything felt strange. Too quiet, too still. A few minutes later, Vanessa came downstairs again, wearing a clean blue dress. She smiled gently and said, "Mom, I'm going to the market early today. Do you want me to get anything?" I tried to sound normal. "Just some tomatoes, honey." She nodded, picked up her basket, and left. I watched her walk through the gate like she always did. The same walk, the same smile, the same tone of voice, but something inside me had changed. I don't remember how long I stood there after she left. Maybe a few minutes, maybe longer. My mind kept replaying Caleb's words. I couldn't stop hearing them. "She's on my plane." I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands still wet from the sink. My thoughts were spinning. Caleb had no reason to lie. He was careful, disciplined, and honest. If he said he saw her, he saw her. But then, who was just standing in my kitchen? For years, this house had been my comfort. It was where my boys grew up, where laughter filled every corner. But in that moment, I felt something I had never felt there before. Fear. Fear of the quiet, fear of the walls that had always felt so safe. I looked toward the door where Vanessa had just walked out, and I whispered to myself, if Vanessa is on that plane, then who is in my house? When the sound of the water stopped, everything in the house went quiet. I froze where I was, holding the phone in my hand, Caleb's voice still echoing in my ear. "Mom, I'm looking at her right now. She's on the plane. She's sitting in first class." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mouth was dry. My hands were shaking. Then I heard it, the creak of the bathroom door opening. Footsteps. Slow, soft, coming down the stairs. "Mom?" I turned and there she was. Vanessa. Her hair was wet, water dripping down her neck. She smiled like nothing was wrong. "Who was on the phone?" she asked. I swallowed hard. "Oh, just a friend." She nodded, still smiling, and started walking toward the kitchen. I stood there, watching her every move. In my ear, Caleb was still talking. "Mom, are you there? Can you hear me?" "She's right in front of me, Mom. I swear it's her." I didn't answer. I just stared at the stairs, at the woman who had just walked down them. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. For a moment, I thought I might be losing my mind. Vanessa hummed a tune as she opened a cabinet looking for the tea box. Her movements were calm, natural, familiar. Everything looked so normal that it almost made me doubt myself. Maybe Caleb was wrong. Maybe it was someone who just looked like her. Maybe this was all some kind of strange coincidence. But then I looked at the phone still in my hand, at Caleb's name flashing on the screen. He wouldn't lie to me. Caleb has always been the careful one. When he says he's sure, he's sure. I put the phone down on the counter and tried to steady my breathing. My hands were trembling so hard I had to grip the edge of the sink. Vanessa turned around and smiled again. "Would you like some tea, Mom?" Her tone was kind, sweet, the same tone I'd heard for years. I forced a nod. "Yes, honey. That would be nice." She filled the kettle and went about her usual routine, exactly the way she always did. And yet, every move she made now felt strange. Every sound in the house felt louder. The familiar kitchen suddenly looked different, colder. The steam from the kettle started to rise. She set 2 cups on the table, one for me, one for her. I sat down, my knees weak. "Is everything okay?" she asked gently. "Yes," I said, barely hearing my own voice. She handed me the cup, smiled, and sat across from me. For a long moment, neither of us said a word. The only sound was the quiet ticking of the clock. I looked at her face. The same face I saw every day. The same smile, the same eyes. But now, I didn't know who I was looking at anymore. After a few minutes, she got up, rinsed her cup, and said, "I'll go get dressed and head to the market." I nodded. When she left the kitchen, I heard her footsteps go up the stairs again. As soon as she disappeared, I reached for the phone. My hands were still shaking. "Caleb," I whispered when he answered. "She's here. She just made me tea." He was quiet for a second. Then his voice came through, low and steady. "Mom, please lock your doors. Whoever that is, it's not Vanessa." I felt cold all over. "Caleb, what are you saying?" "I don't know yet, but please just stay careful." Before I could reply, the line cut. I stared at the phone for a long time before setting it down. The house was silent again. Too silent. Every creak of the wood, every sound from upstairs made me jump. I sat there at the kitchen table trying to convince myself that everything was fine, that I was just imagining things. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. That afternoon, after she left for the market, I went to my room. I opened the drawer of my nightstand and pulled out the old leather-bound notebook that belonged to my late husband. It was the one he used to write his thoughts in before he got sick. I hadn't touched it in years. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened it to a blank page, and picked up a pen. My hand was still trembling. I started writing, just to calm myself down. Thursday, 10:30 a.m. Caleb called, said Vanessa is on his plane to Paris. Vanessa is here. Just made tea. Looks normal. Acts normal. I stopped for a moment, staring at what I'd written. The words looked ridiculous, like a story that couldn't possibly be true. But it was. I lived it. I saw her. I turned to the next line and wrote, "Something doesn't fit." For the first time, my home doesn't feel safe. I closed the notebook and pressed my hand on it, as if that could stop my thoughts from spinning. Then I sat in silence, listening. The house, once full of comfort, now felt like a stranger. Every corner held a shadow I didn't trust. Every sound made me hold my breath, and for the first time in my life, I wished I wasn't alone at home. After that morning, nothing in the house felt the same. I didn't tell anyone what Caleb had said. Not Ryan, not Owen, not even Vanessa. But from that day on, I watched her quietly. At first, I tried to tell myself it was just nerves, that I was being paranoid. But the more I watched, the more small things started to bother me. The first thing I noticed was her handwriting. One afternoon, she sat at the kitchen table making a grocery list. She held the pen in her right hand, writing neatly and carefully like she always did. The next day, when she was helping Owen with his spelling homework, I noticed she was writing with her left hand. The letters were uneven, almost clumsy. I said, "Oh, honey, since when do you write with your left hand?" She smiled quickly and said, "Just practicing, Mom. I read somewhere it's good for the brain." I laughed, trying to sound normal, but something inside me tightened. Why would she practice writing with her other hand out of nowhere? Later that week, I noticed her cooking habits changing too. Vanessa loved to cook. She always chopped vegetables the same way, cleaned the counter afterward, and hummed while stirring the pot. But lately, it was different. One night, she made Ryan's favorite dish, pot roast, but it tasted completely different. The next day, she cooked fish, even though she'd always said she couldn't stand the smell. I sat at the table, pretending to read a magazine, and watched her. She chopped onions using her left hand. "Didn't you used to hold the knife with your right?" I asked gently. She paused for a second, then laughed. "Oh, I just switch sometimes. It's faster this way." That was the first time I caught myself staring at her longer than I should have, trying to recognize the woman I thought I knew. The next morning, Owen ran to me holding his school notebook. "Grandma, look, Mommy helped me with my drawing last night." He showed me 2 pages. On one page, the words were written neatly, like Vanessa's handwriting always looked. On the other, the letters were shaky, uneven. I smiled. Oh, sweetie, your mom must have been tired when she helped you. Owen frowned. But, Grandma, sometimes she's really nice and sings me "You Are My Sunshine," but other times she just says go to bed and turns off the light. I felt my throat tighten. I kissed his head and said, maybe Mommy just has a lot on her mind, dear. But his words stayed with me all day. That night, when everyone was asleep, I took out the old notebook from my husband's drawer, the same one I had used the day Caleb called. I opened it to a new page and wrote at the top, Notebook of Doubts. Then I began listing the little things I had noticed. Tuesday, Vanessa writes with right hand. Wednesday, Vanessa writes with left hand. Thursday, cooked fish. She hates fish. Friday, snapped at Owen for spilling water. Saturday, sweet, playful again. When I read the list back to myself, it didn't sound like much. Just normal, everyday differences. But deep down, I knew it wasn't normal. The next day, my neighbor Evelyn Green stopped by. She and I have known each other for more than 20 years. She's the kind of woman who notices everything, even the smallest change. She handed me a dish I had sent over the day before. That casserole was lovely, Maggie, she said. Then she paused. But your daughter-in-law, she handed me the dish with her left hand. I thought she was right-handed. I felt my stomach drop. I tried to smile. Oh, maybe she was just holding something. Evelyn nodded slowly. Maybe. It just seemed strange, that's all. When she left, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the empty dish. Left hand again. I picked up the notebook and added another line. Sunday. Evelyn said Vanessa used left hand. I closed the book and pressed it to my chest. I didn't want to believe what I was starting to see. At dinner that night, Vanessa was quiet. Ryan talked about a new project at work, Owen was telling us about his drawing contest, and she just smiled, saying very little. Then suddenly, when Owen spilled a bit of water, she snapped, Owen, be careful. Can't you eat without making a mess? Ryan frowned. It's fine, honey, he's just a kid. She looked at him sharply, then forced a smile. You're right. Sorry. Her mood changed just like that, from anger to sweetness in seconds. After dinner, she sat on the couch reading, while Ryan helped me wash the dishes. Mom, he said quietly, is everything okay with Vanessa? She's been acting strange lately. I forced a small smile. Maybe she's tired, dear. Everyone has their off days. He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. That night, after everyone went to bed, I opened the notebook again and added a few more lines. Monday, calm. Tuesday, angry for no reason. Wednesday, calm again. Mood changes fast. No explanation. I sat there staring at the words. The handwriting on the page looked steadier than my hands felt. I thought about Caleb's voice on the phone. She's on my plane, Mom? I thought about Owen's innocent words. Sometimes she sings, sometimes she doesn't. And I thought about Evelyn's puzzled face. Left hand. Maybe I was reading too much into everything. Maybe grief was making me paranoid. Losing my husband had already changed how I saw the world. Maybe I was just scared of losing the peace I'd finally found again. But then I remembered the look in Vanessa's eyes that morning, when she asked who was on the phone. For just a second, her smile had faltered. There was something cold there, something I had never noticed before. I wrote one more line in the notebook. Her eyes, not the same. Then I closed it and placed it back in the drawer. For the rest of the night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in, the house made me sit up, the pipes, the creak of the floor, the soft hum of the refrigerator. I told myself I was just being silly, but deep down, I knew what this feeling was. It was fear. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and whispered, maybe my eyes are failing, or maybe my heart's been too trusting. Then I went downstairs, made coffee like always, and told myself to act normal. But no matter how hard I tried, the house didn't feel normal anymore. After that week, it wasn't just me who noticed something strange. People in town started talking. It's a small community where everyone knows everyone, and when something changes, word travels fast. I didn't say much, but every time I went out, someone had something to mention about Vanessa. The first person was Mrs. Carter from the vegetable stand. She smiled when she saw me and said, Your daughter-in-law came by yesterday. Such a lovely girl, always asking about my grandkids. I nodded, trying to keep my voice light, but then she added, You know, she came again this morning. I said hello, but she just walked right past me. Didn't even look up. Maybe she was busy, but that didn't feel like her. I told her Vanessa probably had her mind on something, but my heart felt heavy as I packed the vegetables. At the bakery, David waved at me the same way he always did. "Morning, Mrs. Collins. Saw your daughter-in-law again. She's been around a lot lately." I smiled and said Vanessa loved his bread, but then he went on. "Yesterday she was so talkative, asked about my recipes, even said she wanted to learn how to bake. But today she barely said a word. Looked like she didn't even know who I was." He laughed a little, not realizing that I wasn't laughing back. I just nodded, said something polite, and left as quickly as I could. On my way home, I could feel eyes following me. Not in a mean way, just the kind of curious glances people give when they don't want to say something out loud. I've lived on that street for 30 years. I know when people are whispering behind fences. When I turned onto my block, Evelyn was outside watering her plants. She waved me over. "Maggie, how are you?" she asked, lowering her voice. "Is everything all right with Vanessa?" I hesitated, then asked what she meant. Evelyn leaned against the fence and said quietly, "I don't know. There's something different about her lately. It's her smile. It looks the same, but somehow it's not. Like she's there, but not really there. Do you know what I mean?" I nodded slowly, though my throat felt tight. I told her maybe Vanessa was just tired. Evelyn looked at me for a long second and said softly, "Maybe, but I thought you should know people are starting to notice." Then she smiled kindly, the way she always does when she doesn't want to worry me, and went back to her garden. When I walked into my house, the silence felt thick. Vanessa was upstairs humming, her voice gentle and familiar, yet distant in a way I couldn't explain. I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my notebook, and started writing again. Mrs. Carter said Vanessa ignored her this morning. David said the same. Evelyn says her smile feels empty. I closed the book and stared at it for a while. The pages were filling up faster each day, and I didn't know if I was keeping a diary or collecting proof of something I didn't understand. That night, I barely slept. Every sound from upstairs made me open my eyes, the closing of a drawer, the soft creak of the floor, the faint sound of running water. I told myself I was being silly, but deep down, I didn't believe that anymore. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I made breakfast, packed Owen's lunch, and poured coffee. Vanessa came down, wearing a new blouse I'd never seen before. She smiled and said, "Good morning, Mom. I'll go to the market after breakfast." I said, "Okay," pretending everything was fine. But as she picked up the basket, I noticed she carried it with her left hand again. It used to always be her right. It was such a small thing, but it made my stomach twist. After she left, I sat back down at the table and opened the notebook again. I wrote, "Left hand again. New clothes. Smiled, but eyes look empty." Then I closed it quickly, afraid someone might walk in and see. Around noon, Evelyn called. Her voice was low, almost whispering, "Maggie, I just saw Vanessa walking down the street." I waved, but she didn't even glance at me. She was carrying a basket, but it wasn't the same one she had this morning. "Do you know where she's been going?" I said probably the market, but Evelyn replied, "She was walking the other way." That was all. We hung up and I stood there by the window, staring at the street, trying to see what she saw. But everything looked normal. The houses, the parked cars, the quiet air. When Vanessa came home that evening, she acted perfectly normal again. She smiled, asked about Owen, talked about what to cook for dinner. Anyone else would have said she was fine. But now, every gesture she made seemed rehearsed. Every smile felt just a second too late. After everyone went to bed, I sat at the table again with the notebook open. I wrote, "Everyone sees it now. Maybe it's not just in my head. Maybe something really is different." I paused for a long time, staring at the words. Then I added one more line. "The air feels colder lately, not outside. Inside." I closed the book and ran my fingers over the cover. The house was completely quiet, but it didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt watchful, like it was holding its breath with me. I thought maybe things would settle down, that I was imagining too much, but they didn't. Each day, some new little detail showed me that something was terribly wrong. One afternoon, I sat in the living room looking through an old photo album. It was Ryan and Vanessa's wedding album. I hadn't opened it in a long time. They both looked so young, so happy. Vanessa's smile back then was warm and sure, her eyes bright and calm. Inside the front cover was the invitation card, and under their names was her signature, Vanessa Ward Collins, written in that neat, elegant script she used to have. The letters curved softly, confident and even. I stared at that handwriting for a long time, then looked at the grocery list she had left on the counter that morning. It was hers too, but the letters were rougher, uneven, like they came from a completely different hand. The V wasn't curved, it was sharp, rushed. I held both pieces of paper side by side and felt my stomach tighten. Same name, same woman, completely different writing. That evening, Owen came to me with his school folder. "Grandma, can you check my homework?" "Mommy helped me yesterday, but I think she did it again today." He opened the notebook and pointed. On one page, the words were beautifully written, each letter perfect. On the next, the same sentence looked messy, uneven, almost like a different person had written it. "See?" he said. "They don't look the same. Mommy said she was tired, but why are they so different?" I smiled faintly and said, "Maybe she was just in a hurry, sweetheart." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. That night I went to the kitchen to make tea, trying to clear my head. I heard a knock on the back door. It was David from the bakery. He was dropping off a loaf of bread, something he did sometimes when he baked too much. "Maggie," he said, "your daughter-in-law stopped by twice today. Once this morning and then again around 4. Same order, same kind of bread. I thought maybe she was buying for someone else, but she looked like she didn't even remember being here earlier." My hand froze on the counter. I tried to smile and said she probably forgot, but I could tell from his face that he didn't believe it either. After he left, I sat down at the table and opened my notebook again. I looked at the pages already filled with notes, bits and pieces that seemed meaningless on their own, but now, together, started to tell a story I didn't want to read. I began to write. Wedding invitation. Handwriting, graceful, right-handed. Now, rough, uneven, left-handed. Baker says she came twice, same day. Owen's notebook, 2 different handwritings, both Mom. I paused, staring at the words. Then slowly, I wrote the next line. 2 faces, 2 Vanessas. I closed the notebook and pressed it against my chest. The air in the kitchen felt heavy. My heart was beating so hard that I could hear it in my ears. I remembered Evelyn's voice saying, "She's there, but not really." And Caleb's whisper over the phone, "That's impossible, Mom. She's on my plane." All the moments I had brushed off as mood swings or forgetfulness began to line up like puzzle pieces, and they didn't fit. The next morning, Vanessa acted as if nothing had changed. She helped Owen with breakfast, talked about going to the market, even teased Ryan about leaving his shoes in the hallway. She smiled at me, and for a second I almost smiled back. But when she turned around, her expression dropped. Her face went blank, almost cold. Later, while folding laundry, I looked at her handwriting again on a note she left by the washing machine. "Don't forget detergent." The letters leaned left this time, small and cramped. Nothing like the calm, looping handwriting I remembered. I went back to my room and opened the photo album again, comparing the old and the new until my hands started to shake. I didn't know if I was afraid or angry or both. That night, the rain started. A quiet, steady sound against the porch roof. Ryan and Owen were asleep. Vanessa was upstairs. I sat alone in the dim light of the living room, my notebook open in front of me. I didn't even write this time. I just stared at the words, 2 Vanessas. Then my laptop chimed. It was an email from Caleb. "Mom," he wrote, "I'm sending you something. I think you need to see it." Attached was a photo taken on his phone, a candid shot of the first-class cabin on his flight. In the photo, Vanessa was sitting next to a man in a suit. They were leaning close, talking, smiling in a way I hadn't seen her smile in months. The man looked well off, confident, maybe in his 40s. Caleb's message continued. "His name's Adrian Holt. He's on the passenger list." "Mom, that's Vanessa. I swear it's her." I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. The woman in the picture looked exactly like the Vanessa I had lived with. Same face, same hair, but the way she carried herself was different. The warmth in her smile wasn't the same kind I saw at home. It was brighter, freer, almost dangerous. I saved the photo, closed the laptop, and sat there listening to the rain. It wasn't loud, just steady, like a clock counting down to something I didn't want to reach. After a long moment, I picked up my notebook again. I turned to the first page where I had written her name so many times. Vanessa, Vanessa, Vanessa. I stared at it, then slowly crossed it out. My hand trembled as I wrote underneath, "Who are you?" I set the pen down and looked around the quiet room. The house felt smaller that night, like the walls were closing in. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady and cold. It was a Saturday morning when I decided I couldn't take the guessing anymore. Vanessa said she was going to the market early the same way she always did. She picked up her wicker basket and smiled before leaving, her voice calm, her movement steady. I told her to buy some vegetables, and she nodded. I waited until the front gate closed, then stood by the window watching her walk down the street. For a second, I thought I might lose my nerve, but something inside me whispered that this was my only chance to know the truth. I reached into the closet and pulled out Robert's old wool scarf. It still smelled faintly like him, like the days when he used to fix things around the house. I wrapped it around my head and shoulders, hoping it would make me less noticeable, and stepped outside quietly. Vanessa walked quickly, her yellow floral dress easy to spot even from a distance. She was heading toward the main road, but then, instead of turning right to the market, she turned left. That was the first time I had ever seen her go that way. My heart started beating faster. I followed slowly, keeping to the other side of the street. She walked past the park, past the small grocery, and toward the industrial area, an older part of town where hardly anyone goes anymore. The buildings there are worn and gray, and the sidewalks are cracked. I hadn't been in that part of town in years. The closer we got, the quieter it became. The usual morning sounds faded, no kids playing, no cars passing, just a low hum of something in the distance. I stayed a few steps behind, pretending to look at my phone whenever she turned slightly. I could see her basket swinging gently from her left hand. She turned onto Willow Street Alley, a narrow lane tucked behind an old repair shop. The walls were peeling and the air smelled faintly of oil and dust. I stopped for a moment, trying to calm my breathing. There was no one else around. She walked farther down until she reached a small house with a faded number on the door. 14. I hid behind a parked truck, my hands gripping the cold metal of the bumper. My palms were sweating. From where I stood, I saw her knock on the door softly. A few seconds later, it opened, and she stepped inside without hesitation. For a long moment, I couldn't move. I kept watching the closed door, waiting for her to come out again. But she didn't. The street was still, the kind of stillness that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. I thought about walking over there, knocking, pretending to have the wrong address. But I couldn't. My legs wouldn't move. I was too afraid of what I might see. After a while, I turned around and started walking home. My steps felt heavy. I kept replaying everything in my head. Her calm voice, her yellow dress, that house number. I tried to tell myself maybe she was helping someone, maybe she had a friend there, but deep down, I knew that wasn't it. When I reached home, the first thing I noticed was the smell of food. I froze in the doorway. From the kitchen came the sound of chopping, the clatter of dishes, and a familiar voice humming softly. I walked closer, and there she was, Vanessa, wearing a white blouse, her hair tied back, completely calm. "Mom," she said when she saw me, "I decided to start lunch early. I bought some fish. Hope that's okay." I stood there trying to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. My eyes darted to her basket on the counter. It was the same one, but it was dry and clean, as if she'd never gone anywhere. I swallowed hard and managed to say, "Of course, dear." My voice didn't sound like mine. She smiled faintly and went back to chopping vegetables. I stayed in the doorway for a few seconds longer, just watching her hands. The right hand. She was using her right hand again. I went upstairs slowly, pretending I needed something from my room. My legs felt weak. When I reached the top, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. I kept hearing the sound of her voice downstairs, the way she hummed, steady, even, normal, but I had just seen her go into that house. I tried to make sense of it. Maybe I had mistaken someone else for her. Maybe there was another woman with the same dress. Maybe I was too tired, too anxious, seeing things that weren't real. But deep down, something told me I hadn't made a mistake. I had seen her face, her walk, the way she carried that basket. It was her, and yet somehow she had come home before me. That evening, I didn't write in my notebook. I didn't have the strength. I just sat in the kitchen after everyone went to bed, looking at the wicker basket sitting neatly on the shelf. My hands were cold, even though the heater was on. I whispered quietly to myself, afraid to hear the words out loud. How could she beat me home? Unless... The sentence stopped there. I didn't dare finish it. I looked again at the basket, the same one she had carried down Willow Street Alley that morning, and finally wrote one single line in my notebook before going to bed. There must be two of them. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I didn't touch my coffee. I didn't even bother with breakfast. I just knew I couldn't sit still anymore. The image of that door on Willow Street Alley wouldn't leave my mind. The number 14. The yellow dress. The knock. I had to go back. Before leaving, I took a photo frame from the living room, the one with all of us together. Ryan, Vanessa, Owen, and me. It was the only proof I had of the life I thought I knew. I put it carefully into my bag and wrapped Robert's old scarf around my shoulders again. The air felt colder that morning. My legs were heavy, but my heart beat faster with each step. When I turned into Willow Street Alley, everything looked just as I remembered. Narrow, quiet, gray. I stopped in front of the small house with the faded number 14, the same cracked concrete, the same worn-out curtains behind the window. I stood there for a moment, then knocked. There was a shuffle inside, the sound of something dragging across the floor. Then the door opened a few inches and I froze. Standing in front of me was Vanessa. Or at least that's what my eyes told me. Same face, same hair, even the same way she tilted her head slightly when she looked at someone. But this woman wasn't Vanessa. Her clothes were different, plain, old, a faded gray sweater and jeans. Her hair was tied up loosely and her eyes were filled with panic. "Vanessa?" I whispered before I could stop myself. She gasped, gripping the edge of the door. Please go away," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "You shouldn't be here." I reached into my bag and pulled out the photo frame, holding it up with shaking hands. "I just want to understand," I said softly. "Please, tell me who you are." She shook her head and tried to close the door, but another voice came from behind her, calm, firm, a woman's voice. "Elise, stop." The door opened wider. Another young woman stepped forward, wearing glasses and an oversized cardigan. She looked at me kindly, though her expression was serious. "Mrs. Collins, right?" she asked. "Why, please come in. You deserve to know what's going on." I hesitated, but something in her tone made me trust her. I stepped inside. The house was small, just one main room with cracked cement floors and peeling paint on the walls. The smell of disinfectant lingered in the air. In one corner, an older woman lay on a narrow cot, covered with a thin blanket. Her breathing was weak, and every few seconds she coughed softly. The young woman turned to me and said, "I'm Leah, Elise's roommate. That's her mother, Rosemary. She's been sick for a long time." Elise stood nearby, her eyes downcast. She looked nothing like the confident, polished woman I saw every day at home. Her hands were shaking as she clutched a rag. I noticed how rough and red her fingers were, the hands of someone who worked hard just to survive. "Why? Do you look like my daughter-in-law?" I finally asked, my voice trembling. "And why did you come to my house?" Elise's eyes filled with tears. She tried to speak but couldn't at first. Leah put a hand on her shoulder, and that seemed to give her the courage to talk. "She paid me," Elise whispered. "Vanessa paid me to pretend to be her sometimes. She said it would only be for a few hours, just small things. To watch the house, to do errands, to be there when she couldn't." I felt the air leave my lungs. I had to grip the back of a chair to steady myself. "Pretend?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "You mean she sent you to my home? To my grandson? To my family?" Elise nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone, I swear I didn't. My mother's medicine is expensive. Vanessa said she'd pay me enough to cover the hospital bills. I thought it was harmless. She told me she just needed help now and then, that she was overwhelmed." Leah sat beside her quietly, her eyes filled with concern. I took a step closer. "Why would she do that?" I asked. "Why would she need someone to be her?" Elise shook her head slowly. "I don't know everything," she said, her voice weak. "She never told me where she went. She just said, 'Don't ask questions. Just make sure they don't notice.'" Her words hit me like a punch. My hands were trembling so badly I had to clasp them together. I looked at her, this young woman who had my daughter-in-law's face, but not her voice, not her warmth. She looked like a reflection of Vanessa, but broken. I walked closer to the cot, where the older woman, Rosemary, lay resting. She opened her eyes slightly and looked at me. "You must be Mrs. Collins," she said in a whisper. "Elise didn't mean any harm. She's a good girl. She made a mistake." I knelt beside her and took her frail hand gently. "She's not the only one," I murmured. When I turned back to Elise, she was crying quietly. "I never thought anyone would find out," she said. "I didn't want to lie to you. I just couldn't say no to her. She said it would help both of us." "Help?" I said almost to myself. "Help her do what?" Elise just looked down. The silence stretched between us until Leah spoke again. Mrs. Collins, she said softly, you might want to sit down. I turned to look at her. She had that kind of look people get when they have to say something they don't want to say. She waited for me to sit in the old wooden chair by the table. The chair creaked under me, and I felt my whole body shaking. Leah took a deep breath. There's more, she said quietly. A lot more. And in that moment I realized this wasn't just about a strange look-alike or a little lie. This was something much deeper, something that had been carefully hidden, right inside the life I thought I knew. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just sat there, staring at Elise, who looked so much like Vanessa that it hurt to breathe. Leah waited until the room fell quiet. Then she sat across from me, her hands folded, and looked toward the old woman resting on the cot. Mrs. Collins, she said gently, you should hear this from her. Rosemary stirred a little, her breathing shallow. Elise rushed to her side, but the old woman waved her hand weakly, signaling that she was fine. Then she turned her eyes toward me. Her voice was soft, almost breaking with every word. I used to be a nurse, she said, many years ago in a small hospital outside the city. One night, a young couple came in. They were poor, barely had enough to eat. The woman gave birth to twin girls, beautiful babies, both healthy, but the parents cried. They said they couldn't afford to raise both. She stopped to catch her breath, the sound of her cough filling the room for a moment. The mother said she could only keep one child. The other, she was going to leave behind. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let that baby be abandoned. So I adopted her. That baby was Elise. The room went silent except for the ticking of a small clock on the wall. Elise stood frozen, tears rolling down her cheeks. Rosemary went on. I raised her as my own. We didn't have much, but she grew up loved. I always told her she was special, that maybe one day she'd find where she came from. But I never imagined. She stopped again, too tired to finish. I felt my chest tighten. My voice came out in a whisper. Do you remember the names of that couple? The parents? Rosemary shook her head slowly. No, it was so long ago. They were from a nearby village just passing through. I only remember the date. March 12th, 1990. That's when she was born. The date hit me like a shock. I had seen that same date before. My mind raced back to the wedding papers, to Vanessa's birth certificate when she married Ryan. It was the same, the exact same day. I opened my bag with trembling hands and pulled out the family photo, then the notebook. Are you saying Vanessa could be her twin? I asked, my voice cracking. Leah nodded gently. It seems that way. Elise covered her face with both hands, shaking her head. No, she whispered, it can't be. Vanessa, she never told me anything. She never even hinted that she knew. Leah looked down, her tone more serious. Maybe she did. I've seen Vanessa before. Once she came to meet Elise here months ago. I was in the next room. When she left, I followed her outside. She met a man by a black car, tall, well-dressed. I heard him call her my love. They were holding hands. She hesitated. His name was Adrian Holt. I heard it when he spoke to the driver. I felt my stomach twist. Caleb's photo flashed in my mind. Vanessa on the flight, sitting next to that same man. Adrian Holt. Everything connected at once. Elise looked at Leah, stunned. So that's where she was going. That's why she needed me. Her voice trembled as she spoke. She used me to cover for her while she met him. Then she broke down completely. She's my sister, she cried. My own sister. And she used me like a mask. Like I was nothing. I walked over and sat beside her. I didn't know what to say. I had spent weeks thinking Vanessa was the only one who had deceived us, but now I saw that Elise had been a victim too. I reached out and took her hand. She deceived my family, I said quietly, and she deceived you too. But it ends now. We'll end it together. Elise looked up through her tears. For the first time there was something steady in her eyes, a kind of resolve. Rosemary smiled faintly from the bed, whispering something I barely heard. Maybe now both my girls will find peace. For a while, no one spoke. The sunlight came through the small window, landing across the cracked floor. It wasn't warm. It just made everything look sharper, clearer, like the truth had finally stepped out of the dark. I stood, picking up my bag. Thank you for telling me, I said softly. Leah nodded and Elise walked me to the door. Outside, the afternoon light was harsh. the kind that makes you squint even with your eyes half closed. I could still hear the faint sound of coughing from inside and the echo of Elise's sobs. As I stepped back into the street, I pulled my notebook from my bag. My hand trembled as I wrote the date, March 12th, 1990. Then beneath it, I added a single line. The twins were never meant to meet, but they did, in my house. The wind picked up, rustling the pages. I held the notebook tighter, my fingers shaking. The truth was out, but it didn't bring peace. Not yet. It only made everything more fragile. I looked back once at the small house, the chipped door, the number 14 barely visible in the sunlight. Then I turned and started walking home, my shadow stretching long behind me. The notebook was still open in my hand, the page trembling in the wind as if it too was trying to breathe. That morning, I woke up with a strange calm in my chest. The truth was already out there, tangled and ugly, but tonight I would end it. Not with shouting, not with accusations, just dinner. A family dinner, the kind we used to have before all this started. I started cooking early. The smell of pot roast filled the kitchen, mixed with the scent of garlic and herbs. I set the table with the white tablecloth I only use for holidays. Ryan loved the grilled fish. Owen always asked for mashed potatoes. I wanted everything to look normal, almost peaceful. Ryan came home first. He loosened his tie, looked at the table, and frowned. "What's going on, Mom? Are we celebrating something?" I smiled the best I could. "No, sweetheart, just family." He raised an eyebrow but didn't ask more. Vanessa came in soon after, humming softly. She looked radiant, hair brushed, perfume faint, that calm smile she always wore when she wanted to appear perfect. "Smells lovely, Mom," she said, kissing my cheek. "Do you need help?" I handed her a dish. "You can set the glasses." She moved gracefully, laughing at something Owen said. Watching her like that, so composed, so ordinary, made my stomach twist. Because I knew the woman in front of me wasn't who she pretended to be. The knock on the door came right as we sat down. Vanessa turned to me. "Expecting someone?" "Yes," I said. I opened the door, and Caleb stood there, still in his pilot's jacket, face drawn and serious. Next to him stood Elise, her hair tied back, wearing a simple blue dress. She looked almost fragile, but her eyes were steady. Vanessa froze. Her hand stopped halfway to her glass. Ryan blinked, confused. "Mom, what is this?" Before anyone could speak, Owen's little voice broke the silence. "Why are there two mommies?" The room went completely still. Vanessa's fork slipped from her hand and hit the plate. Elise flinched, her hands clasped tightly together. I took a deep breath. "Sit down, Vanessa. We're ending this tonight." Ryan's face was pale. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I stayed standing, my voice trembling but clear. "This started with a phone call from Caleb," I said. "He called from the airport that day. He said Vanessa was on his plane, but she was supposed to be here taking a shower in this house. That's when everything started to fall apart." Caleb looked at his sister-in-law, his voice firm. "I saw her, Ryan. I looked right at her." I went on. "After that, nothing made sense anymore. Her moods changed, her handwriting changed, even her hands. One day she wrote with her right, the next day with her left. The neighbors noticed. Evelyn said, 'She's different, Maggie. It's like she's there, but not really.'" I turned toward Vanessa. "I followed you that day. You said you were going to the market, but you walked the other way, to Willow Street Alley. I saw you go into house number 14. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "You followed me?" "Yes," I said simply. "And I saw your other face." Ryan frowned. "What do you mean, her other face?" Leah stepped forward. "Because there are two," she said softly. "Her name is Elise Moore. She's Vanessa's twin sister." Ryan looked from Leah to Elise, then to me. He shook his head. "That can't be." Elise's voice was low, trembling. "It's true. I didn't want to lie. Vanessa asked me to take her place sometimes. Just for a few hours, she said. She paid me. I thought I was helping." Vanessa's expression hardened. "This is insane. None of this makes sense. She's making it up." Caleb stepped forward and placed something on the table, a passport and a boarding pass. "You were on my flight to Paris, Vanessa. Seat 3A. I saw you board. This is your passport. There's no mistake." Vanessa's hands shook slightly. "That doesn't prove anything," she whispered. Leah spoke again, voice calm but firm. "I saw you, Vanessa. At the cafe near the hospital. You were with a man, Adrian Holt. You called each other my love. Ryan froze. The color drained from his face. Is that true? He asked, almost in a whisper. Vanessa's lips trembled, then she laughed. A short, sharp sound that didn't sound like laughter at all. You really want to know? She said, voice rising. Fine, yes. It's true. I have a lover. I'm tired of pretending to be the perfect wife in this dollhouse. I'm tired of smiling for everyone, cooking dinners, playing the good woman. I wanted something better. The words cut like glass. Owen started crying. Ryan just sat there, staring at her, unable to move. Caleb slammed his hand on the table. You destroyed this family for what? For a rich man? Vanessa turned to him, her eyes blazing. You know nothing about me. None of you do. You all see what you want. A perfect daughter-in-law, a loving wife. But I've been living in a cage for years. Elise stepped closer, her voice soft but full of pain. A cage you built yourself. You used me, Vanessa. You said it was harmless. You said I was helping. But you lied. To all of us. Vanessa's face twisted with anger. You were paid. You got what you wanted. Elise shook her head. I didn't want money. I wanted a sister. For a moment, everything stopped again. The candles flickered. Ryan looked down, his shoulders shaking. I could see the tears he was holding back. Was any of it real? He asked quietly. Vanessa didn't answer. She just turned away. The air in the room grew heavy. No one spoke. Then, with one sharp movement, Vanessa stood up, grabbed her purse, and looked at us all one last time. I'm done, she said. You can keep your perfect family. She walked to the door and slammed it so hard the candles went out. The flame hissed and died, leaving the table in half darkness. Ryan sat down slowly, his face buried in his hands. Owen was still crying softly, clinging to my skirt. Elise stood frozen, tears falling silently down her face. Caleb reached out, resting a hand on Ryan's shoulder. I walked to Owen and pulled him close, holding him tight. His small body trembled in my arms. Grandma, he whispered, his voice shaky. Is Mommy coming back? I stroked his hair, but no words came out. What could I say? The table still looked beautiful. The food untouched, the wine glasses full, everything perfectly in place, except for the people who were supposed to fill it. Ryan finally looked up, his eyes empty. She really meant it, he said. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. Elise stood beside us, still crying, whispering, I'm sorry. I never wanted this. I looked at her, the same face, but a different heart. You tried to do good, honey, I said quietly. She took advantage of that. You don't have to carry her guilt. Leah gathered her things silently, wiping her eyes. Caleb stepped toward me. Mom, he said softly, you did what had to be done. But I didn't feel brave. I just felt tired. Owen had fallen asleep in my arms, his little fingers still clutching my sleeve. I carried him to the couch, tucked a blanket over him, and sat beside him, listening to the quiet of the house. For years I had thought of our home as warm and safe. That night it felt like a stranger's place. Too clean, too quiet, like something precious had been ripped out of it. I looked toward the door Vanessa had slammed shut. The sound of it still echoed in my head, and in the softest voice I said to no one, and just like that, the woman we thought we knew disappeared into the night. That night, after the door slammed, everything went quiet. No one spoke for a long time. The food sat untouched on the table, the candles burned down to nothing, and the smell of roasted fish had turned heavy in the air. Ryan was still sitting at the table, staring at nothing. His hands were clasped together, knuckles white. He didn't cry, didn't even blink much, just sat there like he was waiting for someone to wake him up from a bad dream. Caleb picked up the plates quietly, one by one. The clinking sound of the dishes was the only thing breaking the silence. Elise helped him, her eyes red. Leah whispered something about leaving, but I shook my head. Stay, I said softly. Let's just sit for a bit. Outside, the rain had started. Soft at first, then heavier, tapping against the windows and the porch roof. The sound filled the space that used to be full of laughter. I could almost hear echoes of old dinners, Ryan telling stories from work, Owen giggling over spilled milk, Vanessa asking for another glass of wine. It all felt so far away now. I looked at my son. His eyes were hollow, his face tired, like he had aged 10 years in an hour. "Ryan," I said quietly, but he didn't look up. He just whispered, "She really meant it, didn't she?" I didn't have to answer. Owen came out of his room, still rubbing his eyes, holding his stuffed bear. "Grandma," he said sleepily, "will Mommy come back?" I felt my throat close. I wanted to tell him something kind, something soft, like mothers do, that everything would be okay, that people change, that love can fix things. But I couldn't lie. Not tonight. So I just pulled him close, wrapped my arms around him, and said nothing. He tucked his little head under my chin, and I could feel his small heartbeat against my chest. The house made its usual night sounds, the old pipes groaning, the clock ticking, the rain hitting the roof. But somehow, it all felt different now. Even the walls seemed to listen. When Owen finally fell asleep in my arms, I carried him back to his bed. His blanket slipped off, and I tucked it under his chin. For a long time, I stood there watching him sleep. His face was peaceful, untouched by what had just happened downstairs. I prayed silently that it would stay that way, at least for a while. When I went back to the dining room, the lights were dim. Elise had dozed off on the couch, Leah was gone, and Caleb was standing by the window watching the rain. "Mom," he said quietly, "you did what needed to be done." I nodded, though my chest felt heavy. "It doesn't feel like it." He turned to me, his voice gentle. "Sometimes truth doesn't bring peace right away, but it's better than living in lies." I didn't answer. I just looked at the table, at the wine glasses half full, the napkin Vanessa had left crumpled beside her plate, and the small candle that had burned itself out completely. The wax had spilled. Down the holder, hardened into a messy trail. It looked just like what we'd become. Something melted, something that couldn't go back to what it was. Caleb kissed my forehead before leaving. Elise came to me before she left, too. "I'll check on you tomorrow," she said softly. "Please take care of Ryan and Owen." "I will," I said. "You take care of yourself, too." When the door closed behind them, I stood alone in the quiet house. The smell of rain came through the small cracks in the windows. I walked to the shelf where my old journal was, the one Robert had given me before he passed. I opened it, then closed it again. I didn't even know what to write anymore. Words felt too heavy. I sat by the window, listening to the storm. Every now and then, a car passed by, splashing through puddles. I watched the reflections of the streetlights on the wet pavement. Everything looked blurred, washed out, like even the world outside had gone tired. At some point, I whispered to myself, this house used to feel alive. Now, it was just quiet. The kind of quiet that follows something breaking. Not peaceful, not empty, just waiting. I picked up the journal again, traced my finger over the cover, and finally wrote a single line before closing it. Tonight, the house went silent, but maybe silence is where healing begins. Then I turned off the lights and sat there in the dark, listening to the rain. Weeks passed after that night. The silence in the house didn't disappear right away. It just softened, like a wound learning to close. The divorce papers came quietly in a plain white envelope. Ryan didn't say much when he opened them. He just sat at the table for a long time, staring at Vanessa's signature. Then he folded the papers, placed them in a drawer, and whispered, "That's it." I didn't say anything. Some endings don't need words. Elise started coming by almost every day. At first, she was shy, unsure if she should even step inside, but Owen was the first to break that wall. He ran to her the moment he saw her, tugging at her sleeve. "Auntie Elise, can you sing the Sunshine Song again?" She smiled just a little. Her voice was soft and shaky at first, but soon the melody filled the room. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Owen sang along, his laughter spilling into the corners of the house that had been quiet for too long. That was the first day I felt like we might be okay. Since then, mornings became gentler. Elise helped me make breakfast, teaching Owen how to crack eggs without getting shells in the bowl. Sometimes they'd both end up with flour on their faces, laughing until they couldn't breathe. I'd stand at the stove, pretending to focus on the pan, but really just watching, soaking in the sound of joy returning. Ryan started joining us more often. He'd come down in his work clothes, tired but lighter somehow. One morning, I caught him smiling when Elise brushed Owen's hair before school. It wasn't the kind of smile that comes from love at first sight. It was quieter, the kind that grows after too many storms. Elise had that kind of effect on people. She didn't try to fix anything. She just was there, helping, listening, filling the spaces that had been left empty. She planted new flowers in the garden with Owen, said they were for new beginnings. I didn't have the heart to tell her that's exactly where Vanessa used to keep her roses. Maybe it was better that way, to cover old roots with new blooms. Sometimes I'd find Ryan sitting on the porch in the evenings, a cup of coffee in his hands, watching Elise read with Owen by the steps. Their voices were soft, weaving between words and laughter. I'd see him look at them, not with pain anymore, but with something else, something tender, cautious, alive. At night, after Owen went to bed, I'd open my journal, the same one that once held pages of doubt and fear. Now, the words came slower, gentler. "Pain makes room for love again," I wrote one night. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. There were still moments of sadness. Some mornings, Ryan would drift off while staring at the empty chair across from him. Sometimes Owen would ask, "Can I write Mommy a letter?" And I'd help him, letting him send his words into the world even if they'd never find her. Healing doesn't erase what happened. It just teaches you how to carry it. One Sunday afternoon, the three of them were in the yard. Owen was showing Elise how to fly a paper plane. Ryan was fixing the fence. I sat on the porch, pretending to knit, but mostly just watching them. The sunlight fell through the trees in stripes. Elise's hair glowed in the light, and Owen laughed every time his plane crashed into the bushes. Ryan looked up from the fence, and for a second his eyes met hers. He smiled. Just a small, quiet smile, the kind that says, "I see you, I'm still here." Later that day, Elise brought me a small vase of fresh lavender from the garden. "They finally bloomed," she said, placing it by the window. I nodded, touching the petals gently. "They're beautiful." She smiled. "It feels peaceful here now." And she was right. The house didn't echo anymore. The rooms didn't feel cold. The laughter had found its way back, not the loud kind, but the soft, steady kind that stays. That night, I sat on the porch after everyone went to bed. The air was cool and the sky clear. Through the window, I could see Ryan reading a bedtime story to Owen, and Elise cleaning up the kitchen, humming that same old song. I took out my journal one last time and wrote, "This house has seen lies, tears, and silence. But tonight it feels alive again. Not perfect, just alive. And maybe that's all a family needs." Then I closed the journal and let the quiet wrap around me. Not heavy this time, but gentle, because even after everything, love had found its way back in. It happened on a late afternoon, the kind of day that looks ordinary but ends up staying with you forever. The sun was low, the air soft, and the smell of lavender drifted through the porch. I was sitting by the window, watching the garden shimmer in gold. The house was quiet but not empty. It was the good kind of quiet, the kind that hums with peace. Owen was chasing butterflies near the flower beds, his laughter floating in the air. Elise was sitting on the steps, helping him untangle a kite string. Her hair caught the sunlight, and I could see how different she looked now. Calmer, steadier, like someone who had finally found her place in the world. Ryan came out from the house, wiping his hands on a cloth. He looked at them for a moment, his son and the woman who had helped put his world back together. Then he walked closer, stopped by the porch rail, and said softly, "Elise." She turned, her hands still holding the kite string. "Yes?" He took a deep breath. I could see his fingers trembling a little. "You came into this house when it was falling apart. You didn't try to fix it, you just stayed. You brought peace back to this place. Back to me." Elise blinked, tears already in her eyes. Ryan smiled, nervous but sincere. "I don't want to lose that peace again, so will you stay? For both of us?" For a second, the world seemed to stop. The wind, the light, even the sound of the street beyond the fence. Elise covered her mouth with her hand, then nodded through her tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Owen jumped up, cheering. "Mom! Mom said yes." He ran to them, wrapping his little arms around both of their legs, laughing so hard his voice cracked. Ryan bent down and pulled them both into his arms. I watched from the window, and for the first time in a long while, my heart didn't ache. It just felt full. Quietly, deeply full. They stood there for a while, wrapped in the last light of the day. No big speeches, no fancy promises, just a family that had found its way through the dark and come out holding hands. I opened my old journal one last time. The pages were filled with memories of fear, of doubt, of nights when I thought our family would never survive. But between those pages, there were also notes about hope. Owen's laughter, Elise's kindness, Ryan's slow return to himself. I wrote the final line in slow, steady letters. Truth doesn't destroy families. Lies do. Then I closed the journal and placed it on the windowsill, letting the sunlight fall across the cover. Outside, the wind moved through the lavender, gentle and constant. The curtains swayed softly against the frame, carrying the smell of the garden inside. Ryan lifted Owen onto his shoulders, and Elise reached up to steady him, both laughing as the boy spread his arms like wings. I could hear him shout, "We're flying, Grandma!" I smiled and waved from the window. "Yes, sweetheart," I said quietly. "You are." The light touched everything. The porch, the garden, the walls that once echoed with pain. Now they glowed warm and alive. I sat there for a long time watching them. The world outside kept moving, cars passing, birds calling, but all I could feel was peace. Real peace. The kind that comes after truth finally settles in. When the breeze picked up again, I could almost hear Robert's voice in my head, the same thing he used to say whenever life got hard. "Sometimes, Maggie, you just have to open the door and let the light in." So I did. I reached over, pushed the window open wider, and let the late sunlight pour in. Soft, golden, forgiving.